So at this point you have picked a photo that you want to use the pen tool for, and now we're ready to go ahead and bring it into Illustrator. We're going to make a new file for this instead of just opening up the photo directly. So I need you to think about which orientation you want to use, depending on the photo that you have. If you have a photo that's more meant for a portrait, then go ahead and stick with 8.5 by 11. If you have more of a landscape format, then you're going to want to stick to 11 by 8.5. My photo that I chose is more of a portrait style, so I'm going to go ahead and stick with 8.5 by 11. And we're going to call this last name, first name, pen tool photo tracing. This project is going to be a project that's going to prepare you for logo design later, so that when you do go to use your or create your own logo, you will have a really good understanding of the pen tool. So we're going to go ahead and create. And I'm just going to bring in the photo. So I'm going to do File, Place. And I took the photo from my phone and I actually emailed it to myself, and then I sent it to my desktop. So it's sitting right here. So I'm going to actually put this down here like this. And I'm just going to position it. Once I trace it, I can enlarge it and I can reorient it on the artboard, but for right now I'm going to go ahead and just put it right here. It's too dark for me to trace because of the fact that I need to be able to see my pen tool marks, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to decrease it to 70 because my daughter has braids and I need to be able to see that definition, and if I go too light then I'm going to lose some of the details. So just find an opacity that works best for you. And this is going to serve as our sketch layer, so I'm going to go ahead and keep it at sketch and lock it. Now, we spent some time prior to this project in Illustrator organizing your layers. So now it's a matter of taking what you have on paper and starting to put it into Illustrator. Illustrator creates layers and groups completely different than Photoshop. It's a little bit more, more complicated. It doesn't make sense as much, but there is a way to create groups. The way you do it is you first start off with a new layer. And in this case, I'm dividing my artboard into two people, so I'm going to say Leah. And then from Leah, I'm going to create the same amount of layers that I had written down on my paper, and I have 7 layers for Leah. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the sub layer, and then you're not going to keep making sub layers. What you're going to do now is you're just going to continue to make new layers, and these new layers are going to get stored under her file, and I'm going to count how many I need. So this serves as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you can go in and name the layers in the order that you had on your paper. So I had 7 layers. Remember, these are coming from the back all the way forward so that we can try to avoid any awkward overlapping. And I should say at this point that you might draw something and be like, oh no, I should not have put that on top of that layer. That's okay. You can move these around and adjust. Like for instance, once I make Jacob and I make Leah, I'm going to have to start adjusting some of my layers because this is going to cause problems right here because she's holding him and her hand is in back of his arm and it's also in front of her shirt. So there's going to have to be some editing that happens later. But for now, we're just going to stick to the basics. All right, so you can collapse that group and go ahead and make a new group. We're going to call this Jacob. And from here, we're going to go ahead and create sublayer, our first sublayer. And then we're going to create the other layers on top of this. So we have, for Jacob, I had 6 layers. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I go in and I just start titling these. And we have arms. I have his face. I have his ears. And then lastly, I have his hair. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and then I would just start on Leah, making sure that I start at the bottom and work my way up. And again, if you've made a mistake and these are out of order, you can, this looks okay to me right now, but let's say that I did make a mistake, I could just pick this up and drop it on top and reorganize it that way. And like I said, I might need at the end to bring some of Jacob's layers into Leah's layers, because there's a lot of stuff going on right here with the hands and his shirt and his arms. So it just depends on the order of layers for your photo. I happen to have two people. You probably have one, and maybe you won't come in, have this problem. So I would just start with the pants. And I'm going to pretend that I can actually see the top of these pants. And remember, I'm going to be able to use my pen curvature tool. And this mistake happens to me all the time. I forget to turn the fill off, so I just come over here, turn my fill off, and now I have my stroke. And I'll go back to just being a black stroke. Now, the least amount of anchor points you can get, the better. But you do want to pay attention to some of these fine details. So I'm going to zoom in here, and with my pen curvature tool, I'm going to go ahead and curve out some of these edges, just so I can make it a little bit more accurate. And we are not going to be filling this in, so you are not going to have to be super conscientious about things touching each other and closing. If you do want to color it though later, you do want to pay attention to those things. So I'm going to go ahead and connect those. And it looks really funky right now because it's on top of everything else, but it's going to start to come together once I build these layers. And I can go back and delete some of these later because I'm not filling them in, these things are going to definitely show. So I'm going to have to go in and delete a lot of this stuff out by just clicking on anchor points, and I will show you how to do that in class. So once her pants are done, I'm going to go ahead and move on to her hands. And if the pants are distracting, you can either lock them to get rid of the line, or you can just simply turn them off. It just depends. Like, I can't see some of her finger details, so I'm going to go ahead and turn her pants off and then just work on her hands. And there's a lot of little details here, so I'm going to click or zoom in. And remember, do the top details first, like you did with the dog legs, and then I can go in and add those overlapping lines, these lines right here, later. Go ahead and curve out her fingers. Command Z, if you make a mistake, you can undo. And then I would just come in here. The thing with the pen tool is that if you do click on a previous anchor point, sometimes it does disappear. And it can be kind of annoying, so you just want to try to avoid clicking on any previous anchor points if it starts to delete on you. And I could come in here and do her nails. Her hands would look kind of silly without nails, so coming in and just kind of perfecting these nails. The detail's getting really fine, so just try zooming in, getting the curves that you want. If you don't like something, like I don't like the way some of this came out, so I can just move anchor points or delete them. It's hard to see some of the details. Like that's way too big. So I would just start over. And the rest of the project is very similar to this. You would just keep going, go through each layer, and then as you get to the end and you start having overlapping lines, we can add anchor points to some of these lines and delete them. So like later on in the project, this line is going to cause me problems with her hand because I'm not going to be coloring this. So what I can do is I can click on these anchor points individually. And I can delete them. Now if it takes away too much, you can add anchor points to your paths. Like for instance, I can add one here and I can delete it. If it does that, maybe you just have to find the right amount. So let's say I want to delete this one. Then I would add an anchor point here, and then that way when I delete this one, it's only deleting over here. So that'll solve, later on, that'll solve this overlapping problem that we're having with the different lines. So you're going to end up with an outline of the project. Okay, once you've worked your way, and it's going to take a while, you are going to save this and then turn this in on Schooloop.